In this speed presentation, I ask, should the Society for Conservation Biology adopt a definition of conservation? Last year, while serving as a Washington State Fish and Wildlife Commissioner, I was asked to help write a conservation policy. It proved controversial. In the early 20th century, when state wildlife agencies were created to restore depleted game populations, Gifford Pinchot and others defined conservation as the sustainable use of natural resources within a management framework. Preservation, in contrast, meant non-use and complete protection of resources. Conservation, to me, goes beyond the original sustained use idea and emphasizes the protection of biodiversity and ecosystems. Thus, what was conservation a century ago is now sustainable use, and what was preservation is now more akin to modern conservation. Well, so I thought. When I defined conservation more broadly, I was criticized by hunting advocates. They saw my definition as a threat to the agency's current fish and game focus and a slippery slope to banning all hunting. I turned to the Society's website as an authority and was surprised that there is no definition. Getting Society members to agree on a definition will be difficult. Getting wildlife commissioners, agency personnel, and hunters on the same page will be harder. The definition of conservation always has been tied to purpose, and that, of course, depends on your values and environmental worldview. Anthropocentric or biocentric? Whose values count? And I discovered especially contentious among many hunters is the idea of ascribing intrinsic value to animals. Over the last decade, SCB members have discussed what is conservation, with no clear-cut conclusions other than, perhaps, to adopt a broad interpretation so as to build bridges among SCB's varied members. Despite the difficulty, I suggest SCB define conservation. Federal and state biodiversity policy and legislation will benefit by defining conservation informed by science, current environmental contexts, and intergenerational needs of people and all species. For example, most state wildlife departments' legislated mandates and actions rely on conservation purposes that focus primarily on the utilitarian use of harvesting animals. Consequently, such wise use definitions, stated or implied, have slowed agencies from implementing substantial non-game protection. Because the hunter-user pay model endures, most legislatures have failed to provide revenue for broader ecological missions. Wildlife for All and other national movements aim to reform state wildlife management to be more ecologically driven, democratic, and compassionate. The Society for Conservation Biology is seen by policymakers as an expert authority. Its definition will have influence. As a starting point, I offer this definition. Conservation: science-informed actions to preserve the health and resiliency of natural environments, safeguard the intrinsic values of non-human nature, and provide equitable benefits to current and future generations of humans and non-human life. These actions include protecting and restoring air, soil, water, biological diversity, ecosystem processes, and evolutionary potential. If you have any suggestions, comments, or interest in developing a definition, please email me. Thank you.